Alrighty, everybody, welcome back to Culz Reviews. Today we're going to be diving back into history's greatest mysteries, a series that at least Sam and I have talked about previously, thanks to episode one of the Roswell little trilogy that they had going on, or part one, part two, I forget what it was, but we'll get back to that. We do have plans to finish that up before going to Roswell this year. Of course, today being April 15th, we are diving into season one, episode two, which is Titanic's Lost Evidence. Obviously, with today being the anniversary, we thought it was only appropriate to cover this one today versus a different episode. Sam, now having been your second History's Greatest Mysteries little episode that we've checked out, what are you thinking of this series so far?
Yeah, so this being my second time watching History's Greatest Mysteries, I definitely kind of like how they do like their dives into the history and how they tell it like partial stories and then well not partial stories but how they bring the show together essentially. They do a very well job with it.
Yeah, it's definitely a series I've enjoyed. I've watched a good chunk of the episodes provided. I don't know if I'm caught up to date or not, but I think they do a good job. Now, maybe on this one we'll talk. Obviously, they got to make it a little bit more dramatic sounding for audience members, and it looks like we got Andrew here as well. Andrew, how's it going?
Good.
All right, so this episode follows Lord Mercy's kind of journal or diary of the inquiry of the sinking of the Titanic. We'll start with you, Andrew. Is there anything that maybe you took away or learned from watching this one?
I did notice that there was a lot of finger pointing. It looked like there was a lot of things that people tried to hide as well. That the book kind of shed some light on.
See, for me, I think what I took away is how easy it is to discern the Olympic from the Titanic. Uh, Mainly because I don't know. I don't know, anyone that's on social media know again that Titanic switch with Olympic thing has popped up. We don't have any real video of Titanic, especially when it's leaving on its journey that day. So you can definitely tell based on the windows, and you can see in the model because the Titanic had the square windows up front that they kind of refitted. One of which was Ismay's. He had like a little private suit up there, but like the Olympic had giant open windows that were too cold, which they were like, let's fix that on Titanic. So just something I noticed. I don't know why I was like, huh, it's very easy to tell. Or when they used the Lusitania, I was like, wait a minute, it's not even a White Star ship. What is this? Sam, what about you? Anything you learned from this one?
What I learned from it is it goes much deeper into the reason it kind of got all messed up, or that it hit the iceberg at the speed it did, and that a lot of the story was more inaccurate than it actually was. Because even as is, it didn't seem, I don't know, seemed something was off the whole time.
Well, we know Titanic was doing quite a fast pace. Not the fastest ship, obviously, on the waters. Lusitania and Mauritania had that. But it was clocking a good 20 to 21 and a half miles usually throughout the journey the first couple days. And then that fateful Sunday, I think it was about 22 and a half, so adjusted with current was 22 knots. So going quite fast, and at least from the book I'm reading on A Sea of Glass, they hadn't really opened in all the boilers, so there was a chance for it to go a hair faster the next day. And they were actually on schedule to probably end up early, where they were going to arrive on a Wednesday morning. They probably were going to actually arrive on Tuesday afternoon, maybe evening. So they were definitely making some really good time. They were really only racing Olympic, which was her older sister ship. and made a pretty good, you know, travel. They were pretty identical. Titanic had a little bit extra added on at the time of her selling, so that's why she held the record for a little bit of world's largest ocean liner. Andrew, what did you think about the proceedings as far as the inquiry, like who they brought up and talked to and stuff like that?
Well, on which side? Are you talking about the British side or the American side?
We'll start with the British side first.
The first two that they brought up, they were darn, I forgot their names. It was the husband and wife.
Oh, Lord Duffy.
Yeah, yeah. I thought that was pretty interesting. To me, I feel like everybody was trying to hide something, just to kind of have a little bit of that self-preservation.
Mhm.
Um, but they weren't really trying to find somebody to blame. They were just trying to get to the bottom of it.
Yes, as just as far as like why did it happen, you know?
Yeah,
Um, yeah, Duffy and them. I know when the name itself, it's hard to forget there.
yeah,
I know his name because he pops up a lot in the book I'm reading, and every time I'm like, I forget that's a real name.
yeah. That's why it left my head because I was like, well, that's an interesting name, and I'm like, why am I blanking it right now?
I know you're like, what is that? Um, yeah, and I mean, there's definitely a lot of finger pointing. You can see that too. The media really kind of latched on to Ismay being this villain. And while we're on the topic of Ismay being a villain, they couldn't have picked a better villain picture
I know,
for
right?
Ismay. I was like, was that edited? Like his eyebrows and one eyebrow's like up, and he's like smiling evil, and I was like,
So
what is
he's
this?
got that Kubrick stare there.
And then you see like a normal picture of him, and you're like, yeah, he looks like a normal dude. Like, why did they pick that picture? Yeah,
You know that
no,
was on purpose.
Hmm.
well, yeah, you gotta fuel the drama and speculation, I suppose. Uh, yeah, I mean, I think one thing with this too is there's a lot of things that maybe aren't put in, and I don't know. Again, I'd have to see when this came out. I feel like it's more recent than the book, but like with the lifeboat stuff, they talked about there was no like um, drill or anything done, but they had done drills in port, and they were actually going to do a drill the morning that it would end up striking the iceberg, but the wind and everything would made it too dangerous. So they eventually did call it off because they're like, well, it's not worth it. You know, we don't want to like have someone fall overboard.
Hmm.
And the water and the air was getting quite cold that day. In the evening, I think it dipped to below 28 degrees, so quite chilly. Sam, what about you? What did you think of the inquiry?
Well, if we're just talking about the British one, like they were trying to figure out like what went wrong, opposed from the American one that was just pointing fingers and trying to blame somebody for what happened.
Yeah, no, the British one, and I think a lot of it too was the unprecedented size of the tragedy. Uh, just to have
It was
over
massive.
yeah
That
1,500
was
people
huge.
lose their lives, obviously on the maiden voyage of what was the world's largest ship at the time. Just really hadn't happened, and so I know there was one expert in here. I think she was like a behavioral expert or something like that, and it just came off kind of weird how she was talking about like, well, they were just kind of going into it like unprecedented or unprepared. I was like, well, how do you prepare for something like that? You know, how do
Hmm.
you prepare to, especially because like, so how we see the sinking of the ship that night is always via how it appears in movies, which is very bright. It looks like there's lots of light. You can see everything very, very clearly. But that night there was no moon, hence
Mm-mm.
why they could see the iceberg. Plus, the waters were super, super still. There was no waves, so there'd be no froth on the iceberg. And I liked like in here when they're like, there was a large mass in the sky. You could see the iceberg like perfectly in the animation, and I was like, well, that's not how it was. Like if you read like the actual like description of it, all they saw was like the skyline looked a little off, like it was a little bit darker, and they could see some shimmering on the top of it, and that's how they knew there was a berg. and they actually did a good. Like the Titanic could turn actually really fast. They didn't see it in time. Had they seen it like a hair sooner, probably wouldn't have done much damage, if any.
Well, they were getting pretty close to missing it at
Hmm.
at that point, weren't they? I mean,
Yeah,
they barely hit it.
yeah, yeah. They only scraped along like the first like 6, 7-ish corridors, and only 6 kind of not even like punctured, but like just the divots like felled, so they just opened a hair
Right.
just long enough to like get the water in. But yeah, the ship reacted really quickly because that's one of the things when you read the accounts of that night is as soon as he calls the Virgin, he's like iceberg straight ahead. He says you can see the bow already turning. Like everyone went into action. It was just a hair too late. Like they were just a hair
Mhm.
too close. You know. Well, what about the American side, Andrew? How do you think that one went about as far as the inquiry?
It was more like the American way that we do things. We like to dramatize things. We like to make things huge. I mean, it was a huge deal, but again, we like to exaggerate things, hence the pictures like uh,
I gotta find that picture just so I can plop it in the review so people can see it.
um, but again, it was a big event, and there was things that we could have done differently. Absolutely.
Mhm.
Um, and and I'm all for justice and figuring out why the things happened. What could we have done to have prevented it? And that's kind of how I feel like that was going.
Yeah. Yeah, no, there's definitely a long list of, I think, things that went into what happened. And I think that's where it's hard to point the finger at one person. Because,
Yeah, you can't. There was so many other things that could have been done. I mean, with people turning off sonars or the wireless, and um, even then they were sending out the wrong coordinates. But
And telling other
you
ships
know,
to stop notifying them. Like there was a lot
mm,
going on.
right?
yeah. Yeah, which is weird. You mentioned the coordinates, and we know, like, the Sexton one, at least we have evidence that it was wrong. But it's weird because the Titanic was on a pathway to, like, it goes around and then makes a turn so it could, like, make a nice, even entrance into New York when it arrived. And they weren't too far off of that. So Smith obviously knew what he was doing, but for some reason, when they did the Sexton reading, they got it wrong.
Yeah, that's
And
interesting.
yeah, yeah. So I mean, I guess that goes into like Smith as a captain. Um, he at least he had traversed it. He had done the trials with the Olympics, so he knew the ship and he knew everything like that. But yeah, you mentioned they turn off the headset with the radar and the Marconi systems on the Carpath,
Hmm.
or no, the California,
Hmm.
because Carpathia is the one that picks them up. But yeah, the California, and they had completely stopped. And I guess that's one of the arguments is like you could stop or slow down, but could you really? You know, slow down. I think would have been better of an argument. You know, everything's 2020 with hindsight, uh, but considering the cost that those people paid, I don't know if they would have wanted to slow down. You know.
Right.
Hmm. I mean, true, but stopping, especially if there was like lots of notifications that there's a bunch of icebergs and a bunch of that things, you think it would have been like maybe this isn't a good idea. Like even though there was a bunch of people that paid a lot of money for it, it's just like the dude wanted it to be safe, but like didn't want it to slow down.
Right. Yeah, no, there's a lot of people placing bets on how far they would go. That's one of the main things that was discussed in like the smoking rooms of first class was like all right, how far did we go today? Oh, 500, kilometers or something. All right, so this person won. So they were like actively betting. So everyone was quite up to date on like the speed and everything. Sam, as far as the American one, what were your thoughts there?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, it was kind of more to point fingers, and just because of radio transfer that they got that seemed very off and suspicious. And then who knows what other reports that they may have found that aren't being mentioned.
Yeah, I mean, as far as iceberg warnings, I think on the 14th they received 7,
Hmm.
but the last 2 weren't addressed correctly, if I remember. So they never made it that we know up to the board. A lot of people don't think like the captain or anything was informed about the last 2, which is interesting. So again, human error on the other ships. If had they addressed it, maybe it would have made it faster. Because again, the wireless workers weren't White Star employees; they were Marconi employees, and their only job was to transfer messages. So I don't know. At some points, it does seem like a little bit of an act of God, right? Everything had to go right, or in this case, everything had to go wrong for it to happen. You had to
Hmm.
be in the wrong place, the wrong time. The weather had to be the right, super calm, super dark. It just, I don't know. I don't know. Andrew, what about you?
No, it was actually cool. A lot of people, their perception of the Titanic is from the movie Titanic. So that's when you think of the Titanic, that's what you think of. You think of Leonardo DiCaprio and him just throwing his hands up, little hand on the window kind of thing. You don't think of it, and the actual events that did happen. There was quite a few things that were in this documentary that kind of were like from the movie Titanic. Um, I had a lot of the same imagery in my head from the Titanic when I'm listening to this documentary. There was a more in-depth um, conversation about the the captain and some of the other players in in the Titanic.
Sam, what about you? Any kind of like final thoughts on this one?
I don't know. Out of all the ones that we have watched and you have shown me that we haven't talked about, like they all have different like pieces to the puzzle, and the puzzle could almost never be completed because there's the logs that were supposed to be taken that were never taken, either due to the chaos of the moment or lost on purpose, as they mentioned in this. So will always be pieces to the puzzle that can never be found unless, I don't want to say that we do it, but if we go down there and they are in that airtight bag, and then you can find like the last moments.
Yeah, they had that one dude on, and every time he came on, it felt like he was there to just stir up the drama. He talked really loud,
Well, the
and I was like,
captain dude.
I, I
"No,
like
no, no!" The other guy with the gray suit.
Oh, okay.
yeah.
Yeah, no, the captain dude. He was just kind of like giving his own thoughts.
No, from
Which,
somebody who does man ships, he's just like, there's
yeah,
no fucking way. Like,
Yeah,
yeah,
that was funny. That's bullshit.
right. But so one thing I almost forgot while we were going. So they gave a lot of heck, obviously, to the California for not going to the rescue, right? Whether it could have or not. Well, at the same
Mhm.
time, the one guy was like, "You risked all the lives on the Carpathia." I was like, "Well, what do you want? Do you want them to go? Do you want them to go? Like, what? You can't have both." Like, you
mhm.
know. And yeah, no, I just thought of that because I was watching. I was like, "Well, everyone's mad about the California for not going, but why are you mad that they went?" And I
Yeah,
get it;
exactly.
it's a dangerous situation, but they were just trying to be helpful and help people survive. Um,
The
yeah, and going into
California shut down for the night, which was common for some ships to do if they were stopping.
well, even if they weren't stopping, a radio transmission I think stopped at midnight for a time being, up until after the Titanic disaster is when that changed and more lifeboats legally went into it because the Titanic had more lifeboats than was required. It just wasn't
Mhm.
enough for um, all the people on because they had like 2,200 some people on. But they did have capabilities of having more lifeboats because they had the foresight when designing that, well, this law might change in the future, so let's make sure we have the space if it does. So that's why they
Right.
had the divot system that they did, so they could have more in there. Um, and yeah, going to the imagery, the whole animation sinking stuff looked like it had followed the James Cameron Titanic model. It even
Right.
like it was like 90 degrees up in the air and everything, and I was like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
these Titanic. Um, yeah, at some point we gotta go over that one because there's some good accuracies and then there's inaccuracies. Some of which Cameron pointed out because of discoveries he made on the wreck. He in one of the rooms he has carpet on the floor, and because that's what it looked like. And so when he was diving at the wreck, he found out it was
Linoleum.
linoleum. There we go. For some reason, I couldn't get out. Yeah, so he found out it was that with the pattern he had, but it wasn't carpet. So a little fun thing there. Yeah, it's not bad. Like, especially a lot of this stuff that they discussed, I don't think unless you're like super hardcore into researching Titanic, you probably wouldn't know. Uh, and I like that, about this series. There's a lot of topics, even if they throw out a lot of theories that aren't real. I'm not talking this episode because this episode's pretty straight and narrow, but other episodes, there's a lot of theories they give for certain historical mysteries. And I like that, just covering all the bases.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, Andrew, we gave our final thoughts, but what about rating and recommendation for this episode?
Um, and what is our rating system?
Out of 10.
Out of 10? I'd probably give it an 8. It was pretty interesting. It held my attention. It gave a lot of interesting facts that I personally didn't know. So I enjoyed it. I would definitely recommend it.
Sam, what about you?
I would agree with Andrew. 8 out of 10. Like he said, there was a lot of information that like I didn't really know about it, so it like informed me on recent discoveries and some things that I have forgotten that like I was just like, oh yeah, that was a part of that, and like just I don't know for some reason forgot about it, but it was definitely informative, and I would recommend it. They do a really good job on this show.
I was thinking about giving it the good old Keegan 10. Yeah, there we go. Sam's got the rating up, but then I remembered one of our new favorite pictures. We might make that a T-shirt. So because of the evil is made, we'll give it a 7. It bumped it up a whole grade, and that's just for me. Titanic. I've studied beyond I think what's possible. It's something that my uncle really loved. He's met Robert Ballard, who discovered the Titanic in the 80s, and I remember my dad was so happy at one point to get out of that because he had heard about Titanic so much, and then bam, me and Colin came along and we're like Titanic, Titanic, and he was like, uh, yeah, but it's still good. I do recommend it. I like the series, and we'll be back. They got a lot of cool little topics, and again, we just thought we would bring you guys this one because being April 15th, it's the anniversary of the sinking, so we thought we would share it in memory of obviously all the people that lost their lives, and we do plan on doing some more Titanic related stuff. Not as early as we hoped, but just stay tuned to the channel. We'll be getting there soon. But for more Culz reviews, click that link to your left. For more here at Culz Paranormal, click that link to your right. And don't forget to hit that like and give us a subscribe.
Right.
Push the notification bell from personalized to all if you want to be notified on all of the upcoming videos.
Yeah, and let us know what is your favorite movie or documentary on the Titanic. We'll review it, so tell us in the comments below.